In this activity, we will be needing 10 20 ml test tubes, 0.200 molar iron 3 chloride, 2.00 times 10 to the negative 3 molar iron 3 chloride, 2.00 times 10 to the negative 3 molar potassium thiocyanate, distilled water, pipettes, glass stirring rods, and a ruler. We start by preparation of 5 different mixtures of iron 3 chloride and potassium thiocyanate. Let's bring to our workbench the reagents, distilled water, 5 test tubes, pipettes, and glass stirring rods. Label the test tubes 1 to 5. In all 5 test tubes, pipette 5 ml of 2.00 times 10 to the negative 3 molar iron 3 chloride. Afterwards, pipette 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 ml of 2.00 times 10 to the negative 3 molar potassium thiocyanate into test tubes 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 respectively. Then pipette the proper number of milliliters of distilled water into each test tube to bring the total volume in each tube to 10 milliliters. Mix each solution thoroughly with a clean glass stirring rod. Before we proceed, fill in the table of volumes in your laboratory journal. Next, we measure the depth of the solution in test tubes 1 to 5. Since the volume are the same in all test tubes and the dimensions of our test tubes are the same, we will just measure the depth of solution in test tube 1 and assume that the measured depth is the same for test tubes 2 to 5. Using your ruler, we get a depth of record the depth in your laboratory journal. For the next part, we prepare the set of standards or reference solutions. Let's bring to our workbench the reagents, distilled water, 5 test tubes, pipettes, and glass stirring rods. Label the test tubes 1R to 5R. In each of these tubes, pipette 10 ml 0.200 molar iron 2 chloride, 2 ml of 2.00 times 10 to the negative 3 molar potassium thiocyanate, and 8 ml distilled water. Our reference solution has a known concentration of iron 3 thiocyanate ion. Notice that we have a very large excess of iron 3 chloride in our reference solution, while the concentration of potassium thiocyanate is very low. In a case like this, we can say that the reaction is driven to the right. We can assume, with very minimal error, that all thiocyanate ion is converted to iron 3 thiocyanate ion. Therefore, we can simply calculate the concentration of iron 3 thiocyanate ion in the reference solution using the following steps. Step 1. Get the moles of potassium thiocyanate from the given. Step 2. Since we assumed that all thiocyanate ion is converted to iron 3 thiocyanate ion, we also have the same moles of iron 3 thiocyanate ion at equilibrium. Step 3. Divide the moles of iron 3 thiocyanate ion with the total volume of the solution. The concentration that you obtained is the concentration of the reference solution. Solve for it and write it down in your laboratory journal. Moving on, we can determine the concentration of iron 3 thiocyanate ion in test tubes 1 to 5 by comparing the intensity of the red color in these mixtures with their corresponding reference solution. Let's take test tube 1 and tube 1R. Look down both test tubes. Notice that the reference solution has a greater intensity in color than test tube 1. So we drain some of the reference solution into a beaker until its color intensity matches that of test tube 1. Measure the depth of the matching reference solution with a ruler and record the value. Note, the unit doesn't matter as long as you are consistent. If you choose to use milliliter, always use milliliter. If you use centimeter, always use centimeter. And see how deep our reference solution is. We repeat the same procedure for test tube 2. The depth of the solution for the reference is for the third reference solution, we measure a depth of for the fourth reference solution, we measure a depth of and finally, for the fifth reference solution, we measure a depth of Now, we have all the data that we need. We can proceed to the calculation. Using the equation shown, we can determine the concentration of iron 3 thiocyanate ion in test tubes 1 to 5. Try it for yourself and start filling in the tables in your laboratory journal. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask your teacher.